Is the decade ahead shaping up to be a perfect storm for silver? We'll find out in today's episode of Macropiece Theater. I'm your narrator, Emil Kalinowski, and today's very tall tale comes to us from Emil Kalinowski, writing for the Singapore Bullion Market Association in their third quarter edition of The Crucible. In an article titled Silver to the Stratosphere, Emil explains that, yes, he's very bullish about the decade ahead, and he could write about the green energy revolution fundamentals of silver in a boring way, but he misses international travel. And he misses being stuck next to someone who won't shut up on a plane for hours at a time. And also, he's been reading a lot of science fiction. A plus B plus C equals this crazy tale about silver. The other day, while taking my usual stroll through East Coast Park, I was accosted by a disturbed fellow. He queried me, not for directions to Raintree Cove or even when the bullion markets open in London, but about silver and the metal's role in renewable energy. With the global transition to clean energy, what makes silver green? His tone, I would describe it as yelling. His condition, an advanced case of some silver fever variant. I kept smiling and flipped the safety off my lightweight pocket laser, the latest carbon dioxide model from FairPrice, of course, and answered, "Of all metals, it is the best conductor of electricity and heat. When polished, it's near 100% reflective. It's strong, malleable, ductile. That's why silver is used in renewable energy to transfer heat, react to light, and store and conduct electricity." He looked at me expectantly. So what's the popper?" "Huh? The punch, man. You set me up, now knock me down. Ductile. I regretted not bringing my tachyon grenades for my morning stroll. I was forced to buy time until I could think of a polite excuse to flee. I continued. Well, silver will be used in solar panels, electric vehicles, and nuclear power. It'll be deployed in every and any renewable energy project as long as it is in need of switches or relays or conductors or contacts, breakers, fuses, electronics, conductive pastes, electroplating, electromagnetic interference shielding, air conditioning, mirrors, low emissivity glass, ball bearings, water purification, and so on. I had hoped to convey to the silver bug that silver will be used wherever society deems that reliability, precision, and safety are paramount. But I wasn't sure how much the man had understood, as by then a group of orderlies from the Ministry of Health had arrived, strapped him to a gurney, and rolled him off quickly in the direction of the Woodbridge Hospital wards. I thought that would be the last I would see of Silverbug. I was wrong. The Tua Spaceport. A fortnight later, I found myself at the Tua Spaceport, waiting impatiently for the hapless desk attendant to figure out why my trip to Collapsar 1A0620-00 was booked in economy instead of business. I shouldn't have cared, as we'd be spending most of the 1,000 parsecs in stasis without the ability to distinguish between a reclining sofa and a sardine can. Still, it was the quality of the rum served in the two classes that had me gravely concerned. Once aboard the Macerisk II, I saw in my row none other than the Silverbug. I sat down with a heavy sigh. He winked at me, a bit too slowly for my liking, and with both eyes, and said he escaped by pretending to be crazy. You see, the ward only locked up sane people. Hey, as we have a few hours before we're outside of Luna's gravity well, let me ask you something. I wondered when the drink service would begin. Which technologies will affect silver consumption the most? I explained. Well, in 2000, photovoltaic demand, civilians call them solar panels, breached 1 million ounces for the first time, but by 2020, solar panel end use rose to 92 million ounces. It was 10% of total demand. He was nodding enthusiastically. Spasmodics that I mistook for interest. So I erroneously continued. The consensus analyst forecast is that solar panel demand will average 100 million ounces per year between 2021 and 2025. This compares to the 82 million ounce average for the previous 5-year period. But there's quite a bit of variation among the analysts. Looking at 9 different estimates for the upcoming 5 years, the range is an incredible 100 million ounces per year, meaning solar panel demand could be as low as 5% of demand or as high as 15% of total demand. Silverbug was moved very deeply by the uncertainty and let out a respectful whistle. "That's some range, that 100 million, he observed. "It's the best there is," I responded. Though by then the drink service began, and I can't say whether I was thinking of the estimates or the Havana Club Maximo Extra. Likely the latter. I informed Case, the rectangle-shaped Rubik's Cube steward bot that serviced these star jumps, to return every 7 minutes with another glass. "Did I ever tell you about the 1960 Western Airlines flight from Los Angeles to Seattle? This is only the second time I've ever talked to you, but still." He continued as if he didn't even hear me. A businessman and his wife were sitting in the coach class seat. He claimed later that he saw, oh, this, it's all coming back to me now. He saw a gremlin fooling with the engine. I uttered what was a non-committal, and made a mental note to have Case accelerate the schedule to 5 minutes. No one believed him, but when the plane landed, the engine had been tampered with. He looked at me expectantly. I calculated that we had about 6 hours before we got past Luna and were herded to the acceleration tanks. Cursing the Earth-Luna system's relativistic speed limit silently under my breath, I decided to ignore his gremlin tale and continue my silver talk. Well, with respect to vehicles, silver has been increasingly used by the automotive sector as the number of gizmos within each car increases. Night vision, automatic braking, lane departure warnings, tire pressure monitoring, regenerative braking, entertainment systems, etc., etc. His eyes drooped. I pressed my advantage. The industry crossed the 1 million ounce mark in 1995 and stayed there near that total for the next 6 years. The pace picked up ever since, and in 2020, 50 million ounces were used. Forecasts put the annual average for the coming 5 years at 68 million ounces. That's a 25% increase over the 2015 to 2019 average. Oh, but he got a second wind, and he interjected, "I don't think it was the gremlin, but the Budo Ijo, and I think I saw one during the boarding." At this, he turned his head from me and looked out the porthole. But before I could find a wrench, a candlestick, lead pipe, rope, knife, gun, or anything useful in my seat pockets, Case returned, beeping and burping with self-satisfaction at the precision of his 420 seconds round trip. Suddenly, Silverbug began a bananas crazy bombardment. I have several books on this, and if you take a look at the Javanese writings on this, the Buto Ijo is mentioned on a number of different levels. I retaliated with rationality. The greener the car, the more silver it'll use. An internal combustion engine car uses 15 to 28 grams of silver, while a hybrid uses 18 to 34, and a fully electric vehicle has 25 to 50. He shelled me with silly. Now, I was on a flight, as you know, heading to my house, and I saw the Buto Ijo on the wing of my plane, and I said, "Deus, will you look at that, a gremlin?" I countered with a fusillade of facts. Nuclear power. Let me note that 1 to 2 million ounces are used each year in rod cluster control assemblies to control the rate of fission. His pew 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 Well, what do you think these bastards did? They tied me to a gurney. So you see, they don't want you to have the information. My rat-a-tat-tat. Overall, analysts expect 17% of silver to be tied to those three segments. Now, should households, businesses, and governments decide to pursue greener policies than the consensus view, those values would rise further. He said no more. An armistice, apparently. The constellation of Monoceros. The computer decelerated the obsidian hull starship from 25 Gs to 1. The acceleration tanks were being drained. Silverbug was introducing himself to me. My name is Karn. I listen many a night because I don't sleep but an hour. And again, my mother has had me in for electroshock countless times. Let me ask you something. Is there enough future mine supply to keep with silver's dual role as a store of wealth and an industrial metal? Like coming out of surgery, I couldn't recognize my rear sector from a tea kettle, port from starboard, or Tauren from Terran. How was he so cogent? Maybe if you're crazy, there aren't as many connections that need to be reestablished. No, to answer your question, no, there is not enough future mine supply to keep pace with silver demand. At least that's the consensus outlook for 2021 to 25. Hey, can I ask you a question? You say you've had electroshock therapy. Why? Maybe I could sign up, I thought. Well, they say there's something wrong. I only sleep in an hour a night. I never sleep. I don't need it. I only sleep because they make me. And that's only if I take a handful of silver supplements. That's why I need to know. I need to, man. Total supply, which includes secondary sources like scrap recycling, is forecasted to average just 1,062 million ounces for the next 5 years. What about demand? I left unsaid that the supplement demand was precisely zero, as there was no such thing as a silver vitamin. So I continued otherwise saying, well, fundamental demand, which represents industrial, photographic, decorative, and investment demand. Investment demand, like coins and bars? Wild. But I think, and the government has been in my house because they have a radio transmitter in my pillow and one of my 2 cats. Nah. I saw a case ambling our way. I held up one finger, flashed my hand signaling 5, and drew a series of repeating circles with my finger that I hoped translated into infinity. It seemed to understand, and it headed for the bar. Now it was my turn to be unhinged. Yes, investment demand is fundamental to silver. What are you, crazy? Knowingly, he leaned forward and asked, why else would a cat talk to me? Alarmed at what my ears just detected, I panically calculated the distance between the tank bay and the airlock. But before I got too far, I saw Case rolling my way with a silver tray and a tumbler. Pacified, I turned back to Karn and I said, fundamental demand is expected to average 1,044 million ounces per year. So we have an 18 million ounce surplus each year on average. What's not included in the demand figure? Speculative demand, I answered. By that, I mean exchange-traded funds, commodity exchanges, and dealer inventories. If you add all that up, I anticipate an average deficit of 107 million ounces every year through 2025. By now, we had reached our seats, and Karn was looking out the port side porthole. I wondered, why didn't they call them starboard holes on the starboard side? We were approaching our final destination in the constellation of Monoceros. What do you see? I asked. Yeah, man, it's real different. What are the possibilities it has intelligent life? I think it has a high degree of intelligent life. It is a Sector 4, Grade 3 planet, which means it likely has some rudimentary form of cabbage. Tell me more about silver supply and demand. He didn't miss a beat between mad and sane. I went on as if nothing was amiss. And this is before we take a second look at coin and bar demand. The analysts believe the next 5 years will stagnate at the 2015 to 2019 total. This could make sense in a stable socioeconomic geopolitical order, but that's not the post-2008 world we inhabit. I expect investment demand will surge, not stagnate. I really got worked up on that last bit. Now, Karn was staring at me as if I had suggested the planet had some form of coleslaw and that it was emitting strong potato readings. You're getting outer space on this thing, he said with a look of concern that I judged to be well north of mild. Wait a minute, I protested at the implication that I was the cuckoo bird. A perfect silver storm is a government-driven Green New Deal within the context of an inflationary socioeconomic reaction to the global depression in place since 2008. That's eminently reasonable, and it's not even in Anna's outlook, which already anticipates a deficit. Karn had raised his left hand, snapping his fingers energetically at Case in a sort of wavy motion while nodding his head in my direction. Case turned into the galley and took out what looked like a gurney with some industrial-strength straps. He began locomoting my way. Oh, crazy. Who would write this, ladies and gentlemen? Well, I was writing about silver supply and demand, and I was also reading some science fiction, and I wanted to travel. And I thought it crazy that the analysts were totally blowing off what era we were in. They're forecasting that silver prices are going to fall, that silver investment demand is going to stagnate. What is this, the 1990s? Are we in some sort of panacea, economic Garden of Eden, where everything is going perfectly fine and there's no depression in place? There's no financial repression on the horizon that the governments are going to pursue so as to inflate away all the public and private debt? That's what they think. And then they call me crazy. Anyways, I wanted to convey the idea that I'm the silver bug, and I think the future, the next 10 years for silver, is a bright one if politicians ever got clued in to the terrible situation we're in and pursued a multi-pronged strategy, a kind of 1930s make work, make inflation high kind of policy. We shall see. I hope you enjoyed this craziness. You can let me know what you think of it on Twitter at Emil Kalinowski, on Getter at Emil Kalinowski, and on Parler at Emil Kalinowski. Those last two are Twitter knockoffs, off-brand, non-establishment, non-mainstream Twitter versions. Why would I be on those? Because if you sneeze the wrong way, sometimes Twitter will take you off of Twitter for a long time. So I'm just letting you know there are these alternative platforms that I and Eurodollar University be on.